True. Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. The drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamjiverse.
In all that vast area south of the Sahara, before outsiders arrived, no one had discovered the wheel, or made a calendar, or invented even the simplest mechanical device. No one domesticated an animal, or built a two-story house. No one in Black Africa invented writing.
What about all of Africa then? There's not one country in sub-Saharan Africa that's successful. Not one. They're all least developed countries. They're all failed states.
This kind of reminds me, and we could kind of flesh out this conversation together, and I'm not perhaps ready to have it fully, but I do remember going back to Dave Smith where he was conceding a point on, well, all of these other Middle Eastern countries, no, you wouldn't want to live there, you'd want to live in Israel. In my mind, I'm going, well, could you just keep bombing the crap out of them if they ever try to get ahead? I remember watching this clip of him saying that, going, why don't these countries get ahead? And kind of going back in my mind to the Gaddafi speech where he keeps speaking essentially about, you know, here's what we got to do in Libya to get ahead, here's what we're going to do with the dollar, and we're going to be progressive and this and that. And they killed him. And then what happened to those Libyan refugees? I believe they're now pouring into, just like he said was going to happen, they were now pouring into the European continent, and Europeans are complaining, who are these people? And so the question is, are we allowing, because I'm like, Africa's a pretty rich country, like why aren't Africans controlling the diamond trade? Who's taking all of the diamonds so that they can't control the diamond trade? And how long have these people been doing that, being essentially culture vultures? That's kind of the journey that I've been on now in terms of really trying to go back and look into history to see what's happened. And I never trust myself when I have a perspective now, because I realize how much of my opinions and beliefs were shaped by the public school system. And so I don't think you're right. I think that there has been a very sophisticated effort to, just like you would say now, in terms of people that are intentionally attacking Anglo-Saxons. I'm just learning about that there were these books that were written to, we must genocide the Anglo-Saxons, that were going on for a lot longer than I realized. History didn't begin with World War II, but I think it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack that.
Yeah.
Like, are we stopping people from getting ahead just because, I don't know?
That just sounds, I mean, being honest with you, that just sounds to me like a left-wing argument when they say, why don't these countries get ahead? Colonialism. You're a colonizer. It's like, okay, but when we got there, they had no development. When we got to Africa, they had no technological development.
So you think that even if we weren't at war, and sure, you could say that you think that's a leftist argument. I really push back on that because I've learned so much about just like recent history that I didn't know. But you think that the Middle East, like if we had done nothing in terms of the Middle East, that they would just be savages and just be like, you know, America didn't do anything he doesn't set anything backwards, you're just like bombing a place.
Yeah, kind of. I think that we did set them back because when they don't have political order, it prevents development and investment and things like that. But, you know, again, when you look at the antecedents of all these, you know, the history didn't start, like you said, with World War II in the 20th century. There's a reason that European civilization created this enormous gap between them and everybody else. And I don't think it was that it was white supremacy or it was unfair or something like that. I think it's because Europeans are smarter.
A popular white supremacist trope is that black people, black cultures, and black nations never invented the wheel. This perspective, however, crumbles under the weight of archaeological, iconographic, and historical evidence. The story of the wheel in Africa is not one of absence, but of a complex, deep-rooted history of knowledge, adaptation, and rational choice. It is a journey that begins with ingenious proto-wheel mechanisms in antiquity, flourishes in the Sahara and the Nile Valley, and experiences a purposeful renaissance in the kingdoms of Central and West Africa. According to scholars like Cheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga, African cosmogonies, from the Dogon of West Africa to the Woyo of Central Africa, describe creation emanating from a spiraling mass, reflecting a cyclical understanding of time. This philosophy is not confined to oral traditions, but is materialized in symbolic art. The Bamileke people encode it in the patterns of their Ndop fabrics, while the Bakongo depict it in their cosmogram, a sacred circle representing the cosmos. Therefore, the principle of the wheel, symbolizing cyclic motion and cosmic order, was a fundamental concept known to African civilizations since antiquity. Long before the wheel was used for transport, the fundamental principle of rotational motion was mastered in Africa through the invention of the spiked wheel trap. This device, a spoked, circular mechanism, often baited and designed to snap shut on prey, demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of mechanics. Its overwhelming concentration is found in infra-Saharan Africa, with attestations from ancient Kemet and widespread use among diverse ethnic groups across the continent. The distribution pattern points unequivocally to an African origin. The significance of the spiked wheel trap cannot be overstated. It represents a prototypical application of the wheel principle. A tomb fresco from Hierakonpolis in pre-dynastic Kemet, Nakada II period, circa 3500 BCE, depicts this spoked mechanism, placing the concept of the rotating wheel firmly on African soil millennia before the chariot complexes of Central Asia. This African innovation serves as a conceptual and technological precursor, demonstrating that the intellectual leap to the wheel was achieved independently within the continent. The ancient Sahara, during its more humid past, was a cradle of innovation and cultural exchange. During the Bovidian period, from 6000 to 2500 BCE, a time of pastoral societies, the wheel made its appearance in a transport role. The most compelling evidence comes from the Garamantes, a powerful Saharo-Sahelian people identified in West and Central African oral narratives as the Ngara. They were master engineers, constructing vast underground irrigation systems, fogaras, and establishing complex trade networks. The Garamantes are credited with introducing the chariot to the Sahara. Approximately 500 depictions of chariots are etched into rock art across the desert, from Libya to Niger, Mali, and Mauritania. These images, showing both realistic two-wheeled chariots in a flying gallop and more schematic, abstract forms, were once thought to map trans-Saharan chariot routes. The rock art itself, sometimes showing chariots from an aerial, plain view, indicates their power as symbols of status, prestige, and cultural connection within a vast interregional network. In ancient Kemet, the wheel was not an unknown invention later adopted, but a technology whose application reflected a conscious and context-dependent choice. The evidence, as compiled by scholars like Heidi Kopp-Junk, reveals a clear but selective adoption pattern. The principle of the wheel was understood as early as the Old Kingdom. Discovered in the First Dynasty tomb of the official Sabu at Saqqara, the Sabu disc is a meticulously crafted siltstone artifact whose precise function remains an enigma. Shaped like a shallow bowl with a central socket, its most striking feature is a design of 3 intricately curved lobes or wings that fold inward from the rim. This sophisticated tri-lobed form gives the object a striking resemblance to a modern steering wheel. Despite this wheel-like appearance, it is classified as a stone vessel, and its purpose is unknown by Western scholars. In the 5th dynasty, the documented uses of the wheel were not for transport, but for specialized military equipment, as seen in the wheeled scaling ladder in the tomb of Kemet at Saqqara and the wheeled siege tower in the 11th dynasty tomb of Intef. It was not until the 13th dynasty that the first true wheeled vehicle appeared in Kemet, a 4-wheeled wagon with solid discs used in a harvest scene on the stela of Ameneseneb. This pattern of strategic selectivity continued into the New Kingdom. While 2-wheeled carts with spoked wheels were integrated into military logistics, vividly depicted in the Battle of Kadesh reliefs at the Ramesseum and Abu Simbel, they remained specialized tools. The exquisite model wagon, found in the tomb of Queen Ahotep, underscores their status as prestigious objects, not common commodities. The Kemetic people's reliance on the Nile for bulk transport, sledges for moving colossal stonework, and donkeys for flexible overland travel was a rational response to their environment, offering optimal efficiency where wheeled vehicles would have been hindered by the annual inundation and sandy terrain. Far from rejecting the wheel, they masterfully hybridized it with their most effective traditional technology, creating the sledge wagon. This innovation, spectacularly illustrated in the 17th dynasty tomb of Sobeknacht and later in Greco-Roman tombs, fused the wheel with the familiar sledge runner to ceremonially transport sacred barks, proving the technology was not ignored but was adapted to serve uniquely Kemetic cultural and practical imperatives. This was not a failure to innovate, but a demonstration of profound cultural and technological agency. The knowledge of the wheel did not disappear after its ancient use in the Sahara and in Kemet. It experienced a significant revival from the 17th century onward in West and Central Africa. This was not the sudden adoption of a foreign technology, but a re-engagement with a concept whose principles were known from ancient Saharan and Nile Valley ancestors, adapted to the new realities of the Atlantic world. In certain instances, we find extensions of wheeled technologies from classical Africa in post-pharaonic infra-Saharan Africa, such as the Hausa pottery wheels and the water wheel documented in Timbuktu. Contrary to the notion of universal ignorance, the technology of wheeled transport was quite widely known in pre-colonial West Africa. However, its application was intentionally limited and shaped by specific economic and environmental rationales. The evidence reveals three primary uses. The primary application was for status, not transport. Elites in kingdoms such as Dahomey, Asante, Lagos, Calabar, Congo, and Borno fabricated their own African vehicles. These were paraded in processions, often drawn by people rather than animals, to display royal power and magnificence. There was some experimentation with wheeled gun carriages for cannons in states like Borno, Zinda, Dahomey, Lagos, and Abeokuta. African artisans, particularly in Dahomey and Borno, demonstrated a clear understanding of the technology by not only repairing imported vehicles, but also building their own coaches and gun carriages from scratch, proving the knowledge was locally available. The story of the wheel in Africa is a homegrown tale of ingenuity, born in the riverine snares and spiked traps of the Nile, driven across the sands by the Garamantes chariots, and braided into the ritual, craft, and commerce of ancient Kemet. This is not a narrative of late adoption, but of continuous, contextual creativity. Wheels appear as both pragmatic tools and charged symbols, worked by hands that knew soil, axle, and star. When West and Central African polities later refashioned and reactivated wheeled technologies, they were not discovering something foreign. They were renewing an ancestral memory and adapting deep technical know-how to new trade routes, military needs, and ecological demands.
Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like pirates' lines, we break the bondage tight. Kamji speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Big drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kamjiverse.